Hey, it's Faith Talk Live, the Friday edition of Faith Talk Live. Welcome to Friday. I'm Dan Ratcliffe.
I'm Morgan Hill.
And Rick Probst is not with us today, but he'll be back soon. Not to worry. His beard is okay, and he's okay. Just pray for his dad. His dad's having some health issues right now, but hopefully he'll be getting better. So we're praying for him. But we are joined today by a good friend of ours, Shawn Hart. He's the guy with the kind of shaved head. This is new for you, Shawn.
Yeah, it's a new look I'm going for. You know, it started with me being scared that I had a tick in my head because a tick randomly dropped on my arm while sitting at my desk after a camping trip. And so I thought I need to check for the bite. But then I guess it can't really grow on me because it is hair. And you get that. Yeah, you got that good. But it is growing on me.
I like it. No, it looks good. So you got the me look on top and the Rick look on the face with the beard growing there.
Yeah, I'm just not going to go as extreme as Rick. It's a little bit too much.
Good.
I don't like things to live on my face, so I figure I'd keep it short.
Yeah, who knows what's growing in Rick's beard? But
Exactly.
Anyway, we're glad you're here. If you would introduce us to Ivy Tyson, who's joining us here.
Yeah, thanks for having both of us on. Ivy, thanks for jumping on. We just kind of did this last minute as we thought about talking to cover. Ivy and I go way back, actually, back to Oxford Center for Christian Apologetics. We studied there at Oxford University in 2013 to 2014, became friends there, but actually, I mean, we didn't hang out a whole lot there. It was more after the fact that we became as close of friends that we are. And so she's at the Academy, RJIM Academy here at RJIM. Ivy, I'll let you tell a little bit more about your role at RJIM, but it's been a fantastic thing to journey together. There's quite a few people from our class from the OCCA there in Oxford that have come on with RJIM, and Ivy and I mean, we worked about 20 feet from each other, maybe 50 feet from each other from before I moved upstairs here at the HQ. So yeah, Ivy, how long have you been with the Academy, and share a little bit about yourself?
I think if you ask anybody at RZIM how they ended up at RZIM, the answer is just sort of people just kind of raise their hands in bewilderment and go, I guess God is real. But that's really kind of true, actually. Everybody has this funny way of, I think that the Lord owns all of our stories in a particular way. And I think that's true of all of us. But I think moments in your life that just becomes more clear to you when you're telling it. And so for me, coming into RZIM is definitely one of those things. So I've been working with RZIM for nearly 6 years. And I went to the OCCA program at Oxford with Shawn the year before that. So 7 years ago, I was in school with them. And 8 years ago, I had never heard of them, had no idea who Robbie was, and had never formally studied apologetics. I'd been doing some of it, but I didn't really know what it was. So needless to say, my learning curve has been fairly steep.
Yeah.
I read my first RZIM book on the plane on the way to Oxford. I had no idea who these people were. I washed up at their doorstep in England and was like, God told me to come teach me something. And now here I am working for them all these years later.
Wow.
So when we were first finishing the Oxford Center for Christian Apologetics program in 2014, RZIM was just launching this thing called the RZIM Academy, which is our online learning training. And at the time, nobody really knew what was going to happen with it. It was kind of experimental. And so the director of the program, Drew McNeil, came to our Oxford class and kind of gave us this pitch of, hey, this is just starting. We don't know how it's going to go. It's going to be cool. If you want information, put your name on a list. Great. I put my name on the list. And then
because you wanted to be cool, right? I mean, so
I wanted to be Shawn, but nobody can be that cool. Right?
Nobody can be that cool. No.
You can only do what you can do. And so my first day back in the States after the program finished, I had an email from Drew in my inbox saying, hey, you put your name down for this academy thing. I need a moderator that helps students go through the content. I had no idea what that meant. He's like, if you're ever interested, let me know. And I'm like, sure, that sounds like fun. Let me know. And he wrote back and said, great, it started 3 hours ago. And so that's basically been the story. But so 5 years later, 6 years later now, the academy has been incredibly blessed by the Lord. Like, the only way to explain the rapid growth we've seen is just the Lord's favor. So we've served over 10,000 students from 140 countries. We've just seen incredible returns on people who really are just longing to dig into their faith in a new way, who want answers to their own questions and who want to be able to better actually talk to the people in their lives. So learning the basics of how do you ask a good question in a conversation? How do you learn to listen well? How can you start discerning the stuff that's going on and get around that to the real person that you're talking to? And so my role has changed over the years, but these days I work as our senior facilitator, which is just the fancy way of saying that I get to deal with the people and the content parts. So we have an extraordinary team of moderators who serve our students and guide them through the courses. And so I have the privilege of serving our moderators who serve our students. So a lot of moving pieces all the time. This morning we have about 1,000 active students. We had 245 just start the core module, which is our prerequisite 12-week class about an hour ago.
Wow.
But I'm excited to see the journey that God takes them on. So we have a core module, we have elective classes, we're in 4 languages now. So there's always something to do when you log in the morning.
How fun. So one day one of them might be thrown on to an interview with Rick and Dan and Morgan, right?
Probably only a matter of time.
All right, go ahead, Morgan.
Well, so Shawn and Ivy, you have a podcast, correct, called Cover to Cover?
Yeah,
is that correct?
Yeah, it's been going for about a year now, right, Ivy?
Yeah, I get a little distracted because we started recording it before it aired. But yes, I think it's actually been available for other people besides us for about a year.
Yeah.
So what made you guys want to get together and do this? We've talked about Cover to Cover a little bit with Shawn in the past, and it's launching again. Season 2 launching next Friday? 3.
Yeah.
Okay, season 3.
Yeah. So we were chatting as we would over coffee as I walk by her desk or, just by the coffee bar. And we just got talking about this idea of the fact that it was kind of, there's selfish motives with this whole thing, is that we wanted to read more books and we weren't finding as much time to. And so what if we started a podcast where we actually had to go through books that would force us to at least read a book for the podcast. And so we have so many great resources at RZIM, both books that are just launching, like Abdu Murray and Ravi Zacharias just launched their book, Seeing Jesus from the East. It's had a great response. But then we also have the books that have been sitting on the shelf for years and are still great resources. So we thought, what if we went through the RZIM library and covered the different books and also had a conversation about it? One of the thoughts that I continually go back to is, how many times have we grabbed a book, read the book, and then put it back on the shelf, and then 6 months later we forget what it was about? And I find the moments where I remember something from a book are ones that I've discussed with someone or had some kind of more in-depth conversation about. This is why teachers do book discussions. You read a chapter, you come to class, you talk about it. And we've all gone through that if we've gone through the school system. So we kind of thought, well, what if we kind of did the best we could at having a conversation about a book that allowed people to think deeper on it? So hopefully it would soak in a little bit more and almost be listening into a book study or a book discussion. And so, yeah, we call it Cover to Cover because that is exactly what we do. We go through books one chapter at a time, moving from cover to cover. And that's basically the intro. Anyone who's listening,
Dawn does the opener every week. Can you tell?
They hear me say that every week. And so it's really fun. We've gone through 2 books. First season was Saving Truth by Abdu Murray. Second season was Sam Alberry, covering the topic of 7 myths about singleness, which I think is just as important for singles as it is for married people. Married people need to read a book about singleness. Going through that book with Ivy as a single woman and me as a married man was actually really cool to reflect on each other's experience and how to do community together. And then now season 3, we're launching into a book, Jesus Among Secular Gods by Ravi Zacharias and Vince Vitale. And it was a fun one to go through.
Yeah, I'm sure. Wow. If you guys have a few minutes to stay on, I know we were going to do one segment, but we're coming up against a break here, but I would love to keep you on and do one more segment if you guys got another 10 minutes or so to hang on. You guys got time?
Yeah.
Morgan, you got time?
I don't.
You don't?
I don't.
Oh no. Ah, boy. All these meetings you have to
Busy
have.
schedule.
Morgan.
Sorry, Dan. My promotion side is coming out.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll have to do the second segment without you, Morgan. Before we get to that, I know you wanted to ask Shawn a question about his cat because you both share a love of cats, right? Don't you?
Oh yeah. Well, today is more of a love-hate, but
I feel you there. I really feel you on that.
depends on the day. But
Yeah.
I saw a cat video. Actually, Dan sent it to me this morning of your cat chasing a laser, and I want to know, what is your favorite trick that your cat does? Like, what's your favorite?
Okay, that's gonna sound really odd, but like, because our cat's been really like loved into submission by our kids. Like it spent its first few months in my
Not
kids'
walking.
pajamas.
Not walking by itself ever.
Yeah, Ivy has been here many times, so she knows. Like it lived in my kids' pajamas. Oh, I mean, it just got carried. So it's not really a trick because it doesn't really know any tricks. Because I mean, I think it just kind of just is like, what do you want me to do? Always. And so the kids come and pick it up, and the cat will just sit there. And kind of like ears tucked back a little bit, kind of like, I'm not super happy, but I'm just going to do this. And so it has the ability to put up with 3 wild children, which I think is, for a cat, is huge. Because
That is
as
huge.
we know cats, I mean, they're going to do what they want to do when they want to do it. But
Yep.
this cat has actually been loved into submission and is taking its role really well.
Maybe they can train mine.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want that. Be careful what
I
you
love
wish
that.
for.
Loved into submission. I love that. There's some theology there or something. I don't know.
I know. I'll have to do some thinking on that before I expound on that at all.
Yeah.
Before I get into some heretical statements.
All right. Well, let's take a quick break so Morgan can go to her meeting, and we'll pick up again with Shawn and Ivy and talk a little bit more about Cover to Cover right after this break. You're listening to Faith Talk Live. I'm Dan Ratcliffe.
I'm Morgan Hill.
And I'm Rick Probst. Rick Probst isn't here, but anyway, we'll be right back. Hey, it's Faith Talk Live, the Friday edition, and we're so glad that you're here with us today. I'm Dan Ratcliffe.
And surprise, I'm Morgan Hill. I'm back.
She didn't have to go to a meeting. Surprise, surprise. It's amazing because she's always in meetings. And Shawn and Ivy were like, yep, we feel you on that. Apparently, you guys have a lot of meetings too?
Yeah. And it's really hard to actually sit in the same spot. Sometimes I get crazy and I go outside and I sit in a different chair, and it's wild.
He could have just stopped
And
the
then you
sentence
get
that
distracted.
sometimes I get crazy.
Yeah. I get crazy and then I get distracted and then I don't pay attention to the meeting. And I don't miss anything, apparently, because meetings, a lot of times, you don't miss anything. Anyway, we wanted to come back and talk more about...
That was
Cover
Dan
to Cover.
Ratcliffe.
That was Dan Ratcliffe.
That was not Morgan Hill.
Morgan loves meetings, so keep having them. We wanted to talk more about Cover to Cover, the new season 3 that launches next Friday, actually, May 15th. And Ivy and Shawn talk about Jesus Among Secular Gods, a book that... How long has that book been around, guys?
I'm guessing
4 or 5 years now.
Was it 4 or 5? Okay.
Yeah.
We got
Rick
complimentary copies of it when I first moved to the office. So, maybe 3.
Right.
Nice. And it's by, obviously, Ravi Zacharias and Vince Vitale. Did he help write that?
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah,
So
it was their second book. They did Why Suffering together, and then they went from there to write this, Jesus Among Secular Gods.
all right. So this is the third book that you guys have covered in Cover to Cover. And first of all, I want to mention that I saw a picture that Shawn posted of Ivy's notes from the book. I didn't see any picture of Shawn's notes from the book.
Yeah,
Shawn
here's
always
my
posts
notes.
pictures of mine instead of his, and I'm not really sure why.
Shawn likes to keep his copy clean, apparently.
Yeah, no, I picked the page that I didn't write anything on.
I got you.
Yeah. Yeah, but I always find her notes so much more intelligible.
Yeah, I like that. That's just like me. Whenever I took a class with my wife, Kathy, I always used her notes, and I didn't bother taking any. I think that's a different story altogether. Anyway, as you guys went through Jesus Among Secular Gods, obviously this probably was not the first time that you read the book, but as you're going through to really pick things out, what new things, anything new that popped out to you that just really made you go, wow, that is awesome?
You know, every book is a little different. And so every season of the podcast, we kind of feel like we're starting all over again because the point of each book is different, the style is different. And so going from Abdi's book, Saving Truth, to Sam's book, 7 Myths About Singleness, Sam's book is very practical and very pastoral and really kind of laser focused into like your soul and like how you doing with the Lord. Incredibly convicting, really helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And so moving from that into this heavy duty apologetics, philosophical kind of treatise that Ravi and Vince are putting together, it was sort of like you had to like shift gears on your mental car really fast because there's just so much stuff to talk about. And every chapter in this book focuses on one of the, what they're calling secular gods. So this is kind of like the isms that we run into. So it could be scientism or pluralism or relativism. And so digging into each one of those and asking the question, what is the good desire that lives in the middle of that particular philosophy, that particular worldview? So like, is there something in there that we can affirm as true or good? And then asking the hard question of, if this is true, if you really believe this, what are the implications for you as a person? And what are the applications when you're interacting with the world and the people around you? So they're really trying to get through the philosophy and into this question of how do your beliefs flow out of you? Like what happens in your words and your actions and your beliefs and your affections if you believe one of these things? And then asking the question, on balance, if you look at that kind of life, and if you look on the kind of life that a coherent Christian should have, what's the appeal? And what are the challenges? And so that's a lot of work to get done in one chapter at a time. And so there's a lot going on in all of these chapters. It's really dense and there's a lot of stuff to sort through. So Shawn and I have actually said this a number of times over the course of recording this season, that even working for an apologetics evangelistic ministry and being around these guys a lot and being able to walk down the hallway and be able to like pop into Vince's office and go, okay, no, really, like this sentence, what did you mean? There's still a lot to process here. And the kind of power punch combo of Ravi and Vince writing means that the style changes from chapter to chapter, but it also means that there's this big wealth of experience between the two of them, that they're kind of coming in from different angles. And so I think for me, like with all of that, some of it has just been learning to slow down and actually really read carefully again. Like it's one of those skills that once you learn it once, it doesn't just go away. You have to keep coming back to it as a discipline, to read carefully, to ask clarifying questions as you're reading, to go do the work of looking things up if you don't know them. So I've been learning a lot personally, just kind of the humility of like, just because you've read 100 books doesn't mean you've read this book. But
what about you, Shawn? Go ahead.
No, like that's been the thing for me.
Okay. Yeah, I think for me, I mean, there's a lot. This was actually my first time reading through this entire book. I think that's one of the great things about the trust that we could put in RZIM authors and what they put out and what we publish, is that like I didn't have to read the book prior to knowing that it'd be really good to cover. So in the sense, I like that too, because it gives the audience that's going along with us a little bit of rawness to it. I mean, I remember being in the humanism chapter and realizing that like I hadn't thought, one, to the depth that Robbie was writing on about humanism, but I also hadn't thought in the same framework he was explaining humanism in. So I had to read it like 2 or 3 times over to even start to get it. And even on the podcast, if you guys listen to that episode, you'll hear me say like, I'm still currently struggling with actually grappling with some of the ideas here. And so I like that because I feel like that's how a lot of people will just naturally feel as they get into some of this. And so it allows me to kind of sit with people rather than being like, okay, I've mastered all of this. And this book is now, I've got it and I'm here to now, expound on everything that you need to know about it. No, I'm still actually processing it. And there's been times in the podcast where during the recording, because Ivy and I don't do a lot of prep prior to, we kind of say, okay, here's some main points. And then we just have a conversation on the microphone. And what that allows us to do is process through things. So sometimes she'll ask me a question that I don't really know how to answer that. And then we've actually worked through it and come to a conclusion while recording. So it has that natural kind of kick back, informal flow to it, which we appreciate. But I think one of the things that for me is there's really talking about these different ideas of, he says, we've created gods that we can control. Scientism leads to our technology. Relativism, we have a God of our perspective. Humanism, we have a God of our ability. Pantheism kind of strives into this idea of that we are gods, there's divinity in us, and hedonism really links to our pleasure, our God of pleasure. And so you can actually, if you go through this and then you observe the world and observe yourself, your inner world and the outer world, you're able to actually identify, ooh, okay, that's where that person's really tapping into hedonism, where their pleasure is their God. So it gives a really good framework to actually interpret the world through.
All right. We're talking with Shawn and Ivy from RZIM about Cover to Cover, and it starts, season 3 starts next Friday, Jesus Among Secular Gods. Where can they get that, guys? On the RZIM website? Or
Spotify, you could search RZIM broadcasts, or on any of your, anything you listen to podcasts on, it will be there. And you can go to rzim.org or search Cover to Cover RZIM, and it pops up in the search there.
Awesome. Got about 3 minutes left here. Go ahead, Morgan.
And I have a quick question before I get into the other question that I wanted to ask. But did both of you grow up enjoying reading, or is this something doing the podcast that's kind of developed that love in you for reading?
No, knowing we have 3 minutes, we'll do a rapid fire on this one so you can get to your next one. I grew up not liking academics, not liking school at all, but I did enjoy reading. Just had to be a particular type of book.
So there's hope for me then. That's good. Okay.
There's hope.
Yeah. I love reading. I was one of those kids that would rather read than like eat or sleep, or those things were obstacles to reading more.
I share that with you. And so something that's intrigued me that we were talking about before is the reading room. And I mean, I was one of those kids too. I would sit inside all day. I was also an athlete, so I go to practice and then I come back and I would just read. And my mom thought something was seriously wrong with me. But I want to know a little bit about the reading room. I hear you did the first one recently, or was that a couple of years ago, Shawn?
Yeah, no, just recently. So how about I'll kind of give like a little bit of the reason why behind, and then Ivy, you can close out with like kind of what it's about. So one of the things is, with us being a seasonal podcast, we realize there's these big gaps of time where we don't have things for our listeners to engage with, but we've actually heard from people like, hey, what else do you have? Like, what else is going on? So we have 2 ideas that we've launched into. One is the reading room, and I'll let Ivy talk a little about that. And the other one we're going to start to try to do is called like Cover to Cover, like summary, or Cover to Cover Cliff Notes was an idea, but I think that might not be able to use Cliff Notes. And that's the idea of going into the studio and just kind of talking about a book we've read. That's not a book we're going to go all the way through. So here's some main points from a book we just read, and it's worth a look at, or it's not worth a look in our eyes. So that'll be something that we could do, just little 15-minute episodes, and then dropping these reading room episodes randomly between seasons. So there's no real schedule to them. They just randomly drop. So Ivy, why don't you tell a little bit on the reading room in a minute?
Yeah, so the idea was that RZIM has an incredible team of global speakers, about 100 of them now, just exceptionally brilliant people who are called and gifted to be evangelists, undergirded by apologetics, which means they're reading and researching and preparing content all the time. And so we wanted the chance to sit down and highlight, one speaker at a time, who they are, what God's doing in their life, what their story is, but also how do they approach their work? And how do they deal with the reading that they're doing? And do they have research tips that they can share? And our hope is that as you meet Christians, thinking Christians, who approach their work in 100 different ways, that you'll find people that start sounding like you. And you'll be able to find some tips or some suggestions or some ideas that you can implement in your own life as you're seeking to pursue the Lord with your own reading and your own thought life and your own actions. So awesome. We just did our first one with our director of RZIM Kenya. His name's John Njoroge. Phenomenal episode, just hearing about his life and what God does with him. So I'd recommend go checking it out if you're interested.
Okay, and how do they find that?
That's also on rzim.org. It's going to show up in the same places that the normal Cover to Cover podcast does. So if it's already on your playlist, you'll get it automatically when it comes out.
Awesome. Shawn Hart, Ivy Tyson from RZIM, thank you guys so much. Sorry we had to rush through this, but it was fun. Let's do it again.
Thanks for having us. This was great.
Appreciate it. Happy Friday. It's the Faith Talk Live with Dan Ratcliffe and
Morgan Hill.
We'll be right back.